Katrina, and this is the Body for Minds podcast, where ambitious mums reconnect with themselves so they can lead, work, and parent from alignment. More you, not more to do. Today we're going deeper on mental load, not just what it is, but why it's so emotionally charged, and how we move forward with clarity and compassion. This is a cornerstone conversation, and I want it to feel like a steady hand on your shoulder. So how did we get here? Patriarchal structures are the backdrop of mental load. Unequal expectations and outdated norms still shape who's expected to notice, remember, and manage the invisible work. But systemic forces alone don't explain why the emotions run so hot at home. It's also personal and generational. Many of our mothers didn't name mental load, let alone teach us how to share it. Some had different work trajectories, more stay at home or part-time, which does not change the mental load necessarily, let me be clear about that, but made them more likely to accept that was just their part they had to play. And many also internalized the message, you don't talk about the struggle. So our moms didn't really prepare us for any of it. But on top of that, also child rearing has changed, as is normal. The ways we rear our children changes. Working mothers today spend more direct time, let that sink in, more direct time with their kids than previous generations stay-at-home moms. Add to that digitalization and information overload, comparison culture, research rabbit holes, and a constant pressure to optimize childhood. And then there's the partnership gap. Men are catching up, but slowly. What begins as a shared endeavor, a symbol of love and family, too often drifts onto one partner's shoulders. That hurts. You feel left alone inside a choice you made together. When the work stays invisible, it's easy for a partner to miss just how much anticipating, tracking, and deciding happens before any action. Without role models or language for this, many partners get defensive instead of vulnerable. Two people who love each other wind up feeling unseen and unappreciated. But finger-pointing won't fix it. If we stay stuck in the emotional backstory, no app will save us. No reorganization will help. And we can't change someone who doesn't yet see the problem, of course. What we can do is change the terrain, make the load visible, meet ourselves with respect, and renegotiate how we share it with care. Let's walk this through. Firstly, externalize the load. That's what most of the apps are for, right? To just put a task in and then you can share it. And it's important to get it out of your head, okay? To get the load onto paper in one way or another, or in a digitalized document. And the first step doesn't have to be a perfect list. It's just about jotting things down as they arise over a few days, just to make them visible, also to yourself. Because that's the second step. Acknowledge and appreciate yourself. Before changing anything, witness what you hold. Read your growing list back to yourself, or at least skim it. Name the invisible work with respect. Say out loud, I've been carrying a lot. And let that be true. Let it land. Appreciate yourself for it. And then in a third step, evaluate through values versus inheritance. And let me explain what I mean by that. Look at each item in your list, and the list can keep growing. But take some time and look at, is this non-negotiable? For example, this could be safety, health, emotional well-being. For example, like brushing teeth twice a day, or to choose the safest car seat, things like that. And these are things where you feel the standards are non-negotiable, even if who does it changes. Right? So even if you don't do it anymore, even if you don't research the safest car seat or buying the best toothpaste or whatever, although how that is non-negotiable, you need to decide that for yourself. But the standards are the same. You assume that your partner would agree that, for example, your child needs to wear a helmet when they're riding their bike. And then the second thing to think about, so those are tasks that are non-negotiable. Like I said, the standards don't change, but they could change who they belong to. And then you look at items that in your list that you consider a meaningful choice that aligns with your values, but that maybe you don't need to do as perfectly as you're always trying them to do. So basically you're saying, this is important to me, I want it to be like that, but maybe I don't need to do it as thoroughly. For me, that example would be the minimal or barefoot shoes that my kids wear. I'm always kind of measuring again and again to make sure I get their foot length and width right. And then I go to different stores, I check the tables, and it always takes up a lot of time. It's just something I do. And so I could probably just go to one store and just notice if the shape of the foot has changed. But yeah, anyways, I don't want to bore you with barefoot shoes. So think about where you are maybe doing it more perfectly than it needs to be done. And then lastly is the inherited standard. And I mean by that, anything that you do because your mom did it for you as a kid, or because culture expects it, or because you see other families do it. The examples are like picture day outfits, or do they have to wear a tie, or will they just go in their sneakers and sweatpants, if that's what they're comfortable with, or that you make themed snacks or whatever. And ask yourself, who am I doing this for? And in all this, use your body as a compass, because value-aligned items, so items that you feel are important to you, they're maybe not non-negotiable because they're not safety, health, emotional well-being, but they're important to you. They will feel like grounding, like something you really want to do, that you are willing to make an effort to as well. Whereas inherited is more like, this is something I should do. What will others think if I don't do it? And your body will kind of give you clues, like you will feel like more tight and more stressed about those shoulds, those inherited items, as opposed to those that you actually feel are in line with your values and what you want for your family. So step 4 is release or reduce. That means let go of what doesn't align with your or your kids, your family's real needs or your values. And where you do keep something, ask, how can I make this easier? It is okay to make our lives easier. We are not lazy if we do that. It's just we've got a lot going on, so we need to make things easier for ourselves too. Like in my example with the barefoot shoes, I'm coming back to it. Choose fewer brands to research. Just use one trusted store. And that means you've got fewer checks. You just check, in my case, the basic size and width. If that still fits, go with it. Or choose longer reorder intervals, or, try to simplify your standards. There are many ways in which we can make it easier for ourselves. And this leads me to step 5. Once you start sharing, so once you've evaluated all the things that you do, or most of them, bit by bit, that is the moment when you can actually start sharing, because you are already clear on where you won't negotiate standards and what you really want to keep and what you can actually let go of. And on that basis, you can look at, okay, what do I keep and what can a partner, another family member take on instead? What is something also that the children are now old enough to do themselves? And remember, true redistribution is a handover, not a supervision. You should start with a joint agreement on what shifts hands, and start small. Start with just 1 or 2 tasks, and then think about how you want to transition that, on what schedule. If you expect your partner who has never dealt with a specific task to just do it on their own the next day, they will be struggling. I think we need to approach this more like a handover at work, a new colleague who is kind of not only onboarded, but who comes in and needs to learn the job. And that way you also get the appreciation for what it is, because child rearing, care work is work. And if we see it that way, it's also a different kind of handover, because the person who's all the time done this task obviously has got more experience than the person who has never or very rarely done it. And so it's okay for that person to have some kind of authority also over how it's done, at least initially, until the other person can establish their own ways. But that is part of the whole transition. You got to walk through what, when, how often, and why a task matters. And then agree on check-ins and maybe a date by when full ownership passes over. That is maybe a bit like over the top, but just say, in a family, you're always there to ask questions, right? So it's not about not being there anymore and you're creating silos for each of you to just deal with their tasks, right? But it's about allowing the partner also to take ownership and change the way in which they execute the tasks. And once that works, you have check-ins, you see how it's going, and then you go to the next batch of tasks that needs handing over. Because if you hand everything over in one go, mistakes and frustration are almost guaranteed. And they often end in a spiral of defensiveness and resentment instead of trust. A phased redistribution builds skill, confidence, and mutual respect. And I mentioned this before, but some things will always require teamwork, especially in a family. And it's not about silo building. It's shared leadership for a common goal, a mostly smoothly running family life where everyone feels invested, does their share, and feels seen and appreciated. So once the handover phase is complete, it's also important to let go. You wouldn't micromanage a colleague at work once they own a role. At least I hope you wouldn't. And of course, offer support when asked, but otherwise, trust. So now take one more breath with me. You've just listened to a lot. And simply by doing that, you've already started shifting something. Change begins with awareness, not action. So let this sink in and trust that the next small step will unfold when you're ready. If today's episode spoke to you, have a look at the show notes. I'll keep that space updated with helpful resources and next steps to support you along the way. I'm Katrina, and this was the Body for Minds podcast. More you, less noise. See you next time.